I've never reviewed another YouTuber's watch before, but I suppose if I was ever going to do it, then I should do it with the YouTuber who has the most subscribers of all, Nico Leonard. It's the Maen Tonneau, which is a second release, this time not a jump hour, but a simple time-only watch. This watch might already be sold out by the time this video comes out, but that's fine. This isn't about promoting a watch. It's because it opens up an interesting conversation about the relationship of brands, collabs, and influencers like myself and Nico. Before we get started, some of you like Nico, some of you don't like him or his content. Please be civil. Comport yourself with a little bit of dignity, and just to make it simple, if you're going to comment something, just assume that you're saying it to the face of Bas Rutten about Bas Rutten. If you are truly comfortable with saying it to Bas Rutten's face, then go ahead, say it. If not, then perhaps reconsider. As for my own position on Nico, I've met him. He comes across as a really nice guy, and he was really friendly to me. I enjoy his content. It's different from mine, and I find it entertaining. The watch is 1,899 euros on a rubber band plus an additional 189 for the bamboo bracelet. And I'll talk about that in a second. Inside is a Le Jouperet D101 manual wind movement. It's a true no-date movement. It's got 50 hours of power reserve. It's also a two-hander, so there's no seconds hand on the dial. As Nico states, for me, the 1970s was the defining era for an integrated watch design. With the ultra-thin, we wanted to capture that sense of shape, confidence, and wearability. It integrates that design ethos with the best elements of modern horology. Strong shapes, a bracelet that's as important as the case, and a dial that gives the watch real presence. It's thin, it's comfortable, and it's something you can wear every day without compromise. The case is an unusual one. Grand Tonneau is what they call it. This puts it looks-wise in the vicinity of vintage Cartier Tonneaus from the turn of the last century, the AP Carnegie from the 20s. In more modern times, Frank Muller, the 2010 IWC Da Vinci's, some Breguet models, and in the hyper-modern world, Hublot and Richard Mille. The case is 34 millimeters in size. It's a small watch on the wrist for sure. 6.4 millimeters in height, 47 millimeters lug to lug, which puts it in the vicinity of a Black Bay 58, 54, thereabouts. The dial comes in 4 colors with a fume effect. It's got applied textures and an enameled effect. I think I'll start with the subjective part. Do I personally see myself wearing this watch? In steel? No. In gold? A little bit. I was allowed to wear Nico's gold version, so there's no photos of it, but I've worn both. But why not in steel? One is I generally don't mesh well with tonneau cases. They wear weird. I prefer round and cushion, almost always. The steel version with the bullet bracelet also feels a little bit small for me. It's just a little bit dainty for my taste. And for context, I'm wearing a Panerai. The gold, though, I do like that. And it's for the same reasons, because gold gets too flashy if it's too big. So here, where it's a disadvantage in steel, it's an advantage in gold. It also looks a little bit more retro in gold. That 70s vibe comes through more strongly on the gold version. It does the bullet bracelet a whole lot of good to be in plated gold. And, my wife has a gold-plated Casio, the A1000G 9EF, that costs around, 200, 250 euros. And it does the same kind of thing. It's this little piece of flesh that isn't too much, and it works really nicely. Overall, though, it's probably not a watch that's hugely for me. It's not my style at all. My wife quite likes it, bar one thing. She wants a seconds hand. I've also got a buddy that I showed it to, and he's into watches, but he's not into YouTube at all. So he's got zero opinion on Nico Leonard, or me for that matter. He liked it, and he wears Cartier Santos Dumonts, Cartier Tanks, Americans, and vintage Omegas. He did, though, ask if there was a gold model, because he would likely prefer that. So this kind of shape is for a very small group of customers. It's not mass market. It's not broadly appealing in the way a Submariner, Aquaterra, or Datejust are. This is niche. Either you're going to love it or hate it, and it will be down to the case shape, the bullet bracelet, and the no seconds hand. If you like that, then it's in contention. Alternatives include the Eco Neutra Rivanera, which sells for $1,800 in titanium on a black rubber strap with additional strap included. It's got no bracelet option. Inside the watch, there's a Celita movement. The aesthetic is a little bit different. It's more of a tank or a verso than a tonneau, but I think they would probably compete with each other. Longines have the Dolce Vita, which is almost exclusively marketed towards women. That watch is $2,000 on a steel bracelet. It's got 45 hours of power reserve. Being so close to a brand like Longines that has stores and distributors that also have to take a cut makes me have to admit that 1,890 euros feels a little bit expensive compared to the competition. It's not egregiously so, but it's there. Now, to the interesting part. I've got 3 major considerations, thoughts about this watch. First up, like it or not, Nico Leonard first did with the jump hour and now with this watch, not a lazy collab with his logo on the dial and his beautiful teeth on the case back. There are too many collabs of all kinds, which are literally an existing watch and then a minor dial change or an engraved case back. Nico went all in and made something that didn't exist before. That takes guts, and I respect it. I've scoured the internet to find a case that looks exactly like this, and I can't find it. There's no homage to this. The Maen Manhattan has clear inspiration from a Vacheron Constantin from the 70s, but this watch is very original. So I repeat, this takes guts. It's not a lazy design, and it's not lazily put together as a collab. Why aren't you subscribed to this channel yet? I know that 50% of you are return viewers and still haven't subscribed. You're wasting energy searching for my videos. If you click subscribe, they show up automatically and you're watching them anyway. So do the intelligent thing. Click subscribe. Thanks a ton. Second thought, I honestly associated Tonneau more with the turn of the last century. The 70s did have a level of Tonneau cases, but for me, Tonneau is a style I associated with something much older. If Nico hadn't told me, I would have assumed this was a 20s inspired watch and not a 70s inspired watch. The bullet bracelet, though, is very 70s. So, but yeah, it's just I just felt 20s more than 70s. And then third, the big one, should Maen be doing a collab with a YouTuber, and who does it benefit? Now, that's an interesting business question. I spoke to Hublot at Watches and Wonders, and we ended up talking about their Kylian Mbappé collabs and their Usain Bolt collabs. Long story short, most of the watches in these collabs were already sold or spoken for. The James Bond watches from Omega don't always sell out, but they tend to do quite well for Omega. And Nico's first collaboration with Maen sold out. Overall then, the answer must be yes. If you sell out all the watches, then it must be a success, right? Well, you can probably tell that I'm not so sure. I started thinking about these collabs in terms of power balance and synergies. Think about power. Kylian Mbappé and Hublot. Both are what I would call equally balanced brands in their own right. Hublot can sell watches without Kylian Mbappé, and Kylian doesn't need Hublot to make him more famous. Power in that dynamic is balanced. Now, for sake of argument, imagine me doing a collab with Rolex. If you think it's anything other than imbalanced, then there's something wrong with you. Rolex is the big player and totally dwarfs whatever I bring to the table. There would be a brand power imbalance. What about Nico and Maen? Balanced? I would argue no. Nico has greater reach, greater social media impact, and overall is a more clearly defined brand. You know what you're getting with Nico. Maen are still a relatively small and lesser defined independent. They're moving out of that lesser defined microbrand space, and that's important for this context. But overall, though, I would argue that Nico is the bigger brand and there's a power imbalance in their brand values. Part of what happens with every microbrand is that if it grows, they move from being somebody that just sells some watches to beginning to have a clearly defined catalog, a value proposition that goes beyond a low price or nice watches. The value proposition for the independent that is no longer a microbrand will vary, but they start to have some values and some stories attached to them. And those stories emanate from their products and their advertising. Baltic, as an example, are pretty clearly defined for people in the sense that if I say Baltic watch, most people that know them will have a clearly defined explanation of what you get in terms of quality, in terms of pricing, and also in terms of the kind of watches that they make. Dressy, casual watches with retro styling. Skin divers, tuxedo dials, sector dials. Same goes for Furlan Maori, same goes for Fears, same goes for Veja. I would argue that for Maen, that image isn't yet as well defined. It's not undefined, just not as well defined. People will, if they know them, say that they have the Maen Manhattan, or maybe the Hudson, or maybe the Nico watch. But what they won't necessarily consistently do is say, what kind of watch you get when you buy a Maen. That image hasn't completely solidified yet. The brand value proposition, the story, isn't quite set. The reason I think this is important is because when you add a collab where there's a power imbalance, you don't necessarily have control over how it shapes the narrative. On top of this power imbalance thing, there's the question of synergies. Kylian Mbappé and Hublot. If you think Hublot, I guarantee you that a lot of people automatically think footballers. And if you say watches and footballers, you likely think of Hublot. That's a synergy. Stephen Hawking and Hublot, probably not as much. Rolex and their ambassadors are about being the best. So Roger Federer is a brilliant example. My question to you and myself is there a synergy between Nico and Maen other than Nico being into watches and Maen selling watches? To me, synergy implies that two brands add something to each other. Moser and Studio Underdog added something to each other. Studio Underdog got quality and artistic credibility from Moser, and Moser got some edginess, fun, and youthfulness from Studio Underdog. There's a synergy. Universal Genève, they just relaunched. They're really expensive. And right now, they don't have any brand ambassadors. For that kind of price point, they need a brand ambassador. They want to be refinement, contemporary beauty, and style. Right now, though, in the broader non-watch nerd customer base, nobody has any defined image of them. So your job is to pick a brand ambassador for them. So who do you pick? Lil Wayne or Tyler, the Creator? Which of those two names, Lil Wayne or Tyler, has a stronger synergy with what Universal is trying to project? I think it would be Tyler, the Creator. My point is, they can't just pick a random famous person, especially when you still have work to do in defining how the public perceives you and your brand position. If you take Nico himself out of the equation, take the Manhattan, the Hudson, the Classic, and the Brooklyn side by side, and then tell me, does the Tonneau fit in? How does it contribute to defining the mental image Maen wants customers to have of their products? Is it a watch people can like? Absolutely. But is it a quintessentially Maen watch? I don't know the answer to that question, but I do think it's a reasonable question that Maen would have to have asked. And this is the litmus test I would like to apply. And this is something I can only do in 2 years' time. In 2 years' time, does the story become, Maen, aren't they the ones who have those great watches that have those and those and those characteristics? Didn't they also make a watch with Nico once? Yes, they did. That was so on brand for them. Well, if that's the story, then it's a brilliant collab. But if the comments in the future are more like, Maen, aren't they the Nico watch brand? That would not be good, because then the Nico brand dominates the Maen brand. The Nico brand supplants the Maen brand. And again, it's not a statement of whether one brand is good or one is bad. It's about the fact that it risks not being the Maen brand. It risks being the Nico brand that's remembered. Now, whether or not that's ultimately good or bad is not for me to say. A lot of people thought that the Moonswatch by Swatch would be an absolute disaster for Omega, but it hasn't turned out to be the case, despite a lot of questions about precisely the synergies and how Swatch would potentially hurt Omega. But the Speedmaster sells like hotcakes, and Omega's Speedmaster brand has in no way been diluted. AP sells a ton of watches to enthusiasts, even though they for decades catered to rappers and basketballers and other larger-than-life personalities. But there are risks, and for the specific situation that Maen is in, where they are still in the process of fully defining their brand to a broader audience that doesn't consist of pure loyalist first movers, it's a real risk and a question worth asking. Those are my thoughts. Now, a question for you. If I ever did a watch, which brand would be balanced and synergistic with me? It's Patek, right? I know it's Patek. Me, Cherry, buddies for life. That would work. I'm sure it would. Like, subscribe. Cheers.